The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Viridian Prime. Jake Morrison stood at his post outside the Empress's private chambers, his rifle held ready across his chest. The palace was quiet, but something felt wrong. In his 3 years serving here, Jake had learned to trust his instincts. The Zephyrian Empire stretched across dozens of star systems. At its heart sat Empress Lyralai, a being of grace and wisdom whose silver skin caught the light like polished metal. Blue markings ran along her arms and face, glowing softly when she was deep in thought. She had ruled for over 2 centuries, bringing peace to worlds that had known only war. Jake was one of 12 humans who served in her personal guard. It had been a strange choice when she first made it. Many Zephyrian nobles had spoken against it. Why trust aliens with our most precious leader? They had asked. But the Empress saw something in humans that others missed. They were quick to adapt, creative in their thinking and loyal to their missions. The human guards worked alongside 50 Zephyrian soldiers. The Zephyrians were taller than humans, with long limbs and faces that seemed carved from stone. They were skilled fighters, but they followed rules and traditions that went back thousands of years. Humans, the Empress had learned, could think outside those rules when needed. Jake had been a Marine on Earth before joining the Imperial Guard. He remembered the day the Zephyrian ships first appeared in Earth's sky. Fear had gripped every human city, but instead of conquest, the aliens had offered friendship. Trade agreements followed, then cultural exchanges, and finally this honor guard position for selected human soldiers. Now Jake walked the halls of an alien palace, protecting a leader he had come to respect deeply. The Empress treated all her subjects fairly, whether they were Zephyrian, human, or any of the dozen other species in her empire. She listened to advice, made careful decisions, and never used her power to hurt the innocent. But not everyone loved this approach. The purist movement had been growing stronger each year. They believed the empire should belong only to Zephyrians. They saw humans and other aliens as a disease that needed to be removed. Their leader, a former general named Vorthak, had been making speeches across the outer worlds. The empire must return to its pure roots, he would say. Foreign influence weakens us. Jake's communicator buzzed softly. He touched the device attached to his ear. Morrison here, he said quietly. Jake, this is Amy. Lieutenant Amy Collins was another human guard stationed 2 floors below. Are you seeing the reports coming in? Jake frowned. What reports? 3 colony worlds just went dark. No communication for the past hour. And there are ships moving in the outer system that aren't responding to traffic control. A chill ran down Jake's spine. The purist movement had been making threats for months. Intelligence reports suggested they had been gathering weapons and recruiting soldiers from military units across the Empire. But no one expected them to actually attack the capital. I'll inform the Empress, Jake said. Wait. Amy's voice was tense. There's more. General Kithera just called an emergency meeting. All senior staff are to report to the main council chamber immediately. General Kithera was the head of the Royal Guard, a massive Zephyrian with dark blue markings. He had served the Empress for 50 years. If he was calling an emergency meeting, the situation was serious. Jake's door chimed softly. The Empress's voice came through the speaker. Sergeant Morrison, please enter. Jake stepped into the chambers. The Empress stood by her large window, looking out at the city below. Her markings were glowing brighter than usual, which meant she was worried. Your Majesty, Jake said, standing at attention. Jake, she said, turning to face him. The Empress had learned to use human names instead of formal titles when speaking privately. I have been receiving troubling reports. It appears the purist movement has finally decided to act. Yes, Your Majesty. Lieutenant Collins just informed me of the situation. The Empress nodded. Her large, dark eyes showed concern, but no fear. General Kithera has called a council meeting. I want you and 2 other human guards to accompany me. If the purists are truly moving against us, I may need soldiers who can think differently than my traditional guards. Jake felt a surge of pride. Even in crisis, the Empress trusted human judgment. We'll be ready, Your Majesty. 20 minutes later, Jake walked beside the Empress as they moved through the palace corridors toward the council chamber. Amy Collins and Sergeant Ben Turner, another human guard, flanked them. Around them, Zephyrian guards maintained their usual formation, but Jake noticed something odd. Several of the Zephyrian guards were looking around nervously. Their usual calm confidence seemed shaken, and some guards who should have been at their posts were missing entirely. "Your Majesty," Jake said quietly, "something doesn't feel right." The Empress slowed her pace slightly. "What do you mean?" "The guard rotations are wrong, and too many soldiers seem nervous." Before the Empress could respond, an explosion shook the palace. Alarms began wailing. Through the tall windows, Jake could see ships descending from orbit, their weapons firing at the city's defense towers. "The Purists," the Empress whispered. Jake grabbed his communicator. "All units, the palace is under attack. Defend positions and protect the Empress." But as they rushed toward the council chamber, Jake realized their troubles were just beginning. If the Purists had ships in orbit, they had been planning this attack for a long time. And if they were confident enough to attack the capital directly, they must have help from inside the palace itself. The war for the Empire had begun, and Jake Morrison was about to discover just how far some people would go to destroy everything the Empress had built. The council chamber doors sealed shut behind them with a heavy click. Jake felt his muscles tense. Something was very wrong with this meeting. Half the usual advisors were missing, and those present looked either nervous or angry. General Cathera stood at the head of the long table, his massive frame casting a shadow across the room. His dark blue markings seemed darker than usual, almost black in the artificial light. Around the table sat the remaining council members, but Jake noticed that several chairs were empty. "Your Majesty," General Cathera said, his voice cold and formal, "please take your seat." The Empress moved toward her chair at the head of the table, but she paused. "General, where are advisors Zealanth and Morvain? They never miss emergency meetings." Cathera's expression didn't change. "They have been detained for their own safety." Jake's hand moved slightly toward his weapon. The word detained didn't sound right coming from the general's mouth. Amy and Ben, the other human guards, also shifted their positions. Years of military training had taught them to recognize danger. "Detained by whom?" the Empress asked, her voice sharp. Instead of answering, General Cathera reached for something at his belt. In one smooth motion, he drew his plasma pistol and pointed it directly at the Empress. Around the table, half the Zephyrian guards did the same. "By order of the Purist Council," Cathera said, his voice now filled with hatred, "you are no longer fit to rule the Zephyrian Empire." The remaining loyal guards immediately drew their weapons, but they were outnumbered. Jake stepped in front of the Empress, his rifle ready. Amy and Ben moved to flank her, creating a protective triangle. "General, what is the meaning of this?" the Empress demanded, but Jake could hear the shock in her voice. Cathera smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "For too long you have polluted our pure empire with alien influence. You have given positions of honor to creatures that should be our slaves or our enemies. You have weakened us with your foolish ideas of equality and cooperation." The general gestured toward Jake and the other humans. "These animals stand in our most sacred halls pretending to be our equals. They corrupt our young soldiers with their strange ideas and their lack of proper tradition." Jake felt anger burning in his chest, but he kept his weapon trained on Cathera. "The only animals I see in this room are the ones pointing guns at an innocent woman." Several Zephyrian guards loyal to the Empress began backing toward the exits, but the doors wouldn't open. Red lights flashed above each entrance. "The palace computer systems have been reprogrammed," Cathera explained. "Only Purist forces can move freely now. Your loyal guards are trapped, and your human pets will die alongside you." The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere else in the palace. Shouts and screams could be heard through the thick walls. Jake realized that this wasn't just a coup attempt in the council chamber. The entire palace was under attack from within. "How many?" the Empress asked quietly. "How many of my guards have betrayed me?" "More than half," Cathera said with pride. "Did you think your pretty speeches about unity and cooperation could overcome centuries of Zephyrian pride? We are the master race of this galaxy. We built this empire with our strength and our intelligence. We don't need aliens to help us rule what is already ours." One of the loyal Zephyrian guards, Captain Zexhai, stepped forward. "General, this is madness. The Empress has brought peace to dozens of worlds. She has ended wars that cost millions of lives." Cathera turned his weapon toward the captain. "Peace through weakness. Peace through surrender. That is not the Zephyrian way." "It's the right way," Jake said firmly. "The Empress has built something beautiful here. People from different worlds working together, helping each other, learning from each other, What you're doing will destroy all of that. Good, Kythera replied. It should be destroyed. The Empire will be pure again. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open. Purist soldiers poured in, their weapons ready. Jake counted at least 20 armed Zephyrians in combat gear. The loyal guards were now completely surrounded. Surrender your weapons, Kythera commanded. Those who submit now will be allowed to live as servants in the new order. Jake looked around the chamber. Most of the loyal Zephyrian guards were already lowering their weapons. Their faces showed resignation, not fear. Jake realized that in Zephyrian culture, surrender in impossible situations was considered honorable. Fighting when defeat was certain was seen as wasteful and stupid. Captain Zexhide dropped his plasma rifle and stepped back. I submit to superior force, he said formally. One by one, the other loyal guards did the same. Even the Empress's personal bodyguard, a female Zephyrian named Lithara who had protected her for 20 years, placed her weapon on the ground. Jake felt his communicator buzz. He touched it carefully, keeping his rifle aimed at Kythera. All human units, this is command, came a voice he recognized as Colonel Peters, the human military liaison. Immediate evacuation ordered. All personnel to designated extraction points. This is not a drill. Amy looked at Jake with confusion. Are those real orders? Jake's mind raced. The orders had come through proper channels with correct authorization codes, but something felt wrong. Why would human command order evacuation now, when the Empress needed protection most? You see? Kythera said, having heard the communication. Even your own people abandon you. The humans know when to run from a losing battle. The Empress looked at Jake with sad eyes. Sergeant Morrison, you should follow your orders. You and your people have served with honor. I will not ask you to die for a lost cause, but Jake didn't move. He thought about his training, about military regulations, about following orders. Then he thought about the Empress, who had treated him and all humans with respect and kindness. He thought about the empire she had built, where different species could work together in peace. With respect, Your Majesty, Jake said, his weapon still trained on the general. Marines don't abandon their posts. Amy stared at him. Jake, those are direct orders from command. The orders came through compromised channels, Jake replied. Someone wanted us out of here. He looked directly at Kythera. Someone who knew we wouldn't run when things got difficult. Ben hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer to Jake. He's right. Something's not right about this. But Amy shook her head. Jake, we have to follow orders. That's what soldiers do. Sometimes, Jake said quietly, soldiers have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. General Kythera laughed. How touching. The human animal thinks he can save his master. You will die here, creature, and your death will mean nothing. Jake smiled grimly. Maybe, but at least I'll die standing up. The tension in the room was like a stretched wire, ready to snap at any moment. Amy Collins looked at Jake with desperate eyes. Jake, please. We have to go. Those are direct orders. Jake kept his rifle pointed at General Kythera, but his voice was calm when he spoke. Amy, you and Ben should follow those orders. Get to the extraction point. What about you? Ben asked. Jake glanced at the Empress, who sat quietly in her chair, surrounded by enemies but showing no fear. Someone needs to stay with her. General Kythera laughed loudly. One human against 30 purist soldiers? You truly are as stupid as we always believed. Maybe, Jake said. But stupid humans have won battles before. Amy grabbed Jake's arm. This is insane. You can't save her. Look around you. Jake did look around. Every loyal guard had surrendered. Purist soldiers filled the chamber. The palace was under attack from rebel ships in orbit. The situation was hopeless by any reasonable measure, but Jake had never been particularly reasonable. That's what had made him a good Marine, and what made him a good guard for an alien Empress who believed in impossible things like peace between different species. Amy, Jake said gently, get Ben out of here. That's an order. Amy's face showed pain and confusion. I can't leave you. Yes, you can. And you should, Jake smiled at her. Someone needs to tell the story of what happened here. Make sure they know the Empress didn't die alone. Ben was already moving toward the door, following his training and his orders. But he stopped and looked back. Jake, go, Jake said firmly. Both of you now. Amy hesitated for another moment, then followed Ben toward the exit. The purist soldiers let them pass. Kythera wanted the humans to leave. He wanted the Empress to see that even her most trusted guards would abandon her when survival was at stake. When the door closed behind them, Jake was alone with the Empress and 30 enemy soldiers. "Well," Kythera said, "now we can finish this properly." Jake touched his communicator and shut it off completely. No more orders would reach him now. No more voices telling him to retreat or surrender. Just him, his training, and his choice to stand guard over someone who deserved protection. "Your Majesty," Jake said without taking his eyes off Kythera, "I'm going to need you to move behind your desk." The Empress stood gracefully and walked to the large desk at the back of the chamber. It was made of some kind of crystal that looked fragile but was actually stronger than steel. "Sergeant Morrison," she said quietly, "why are you doing this?" Jake considered the question as he backed toward the desk, keeping his weapon trained on the general. 3 years ago when I first came here, you asked me what humans believed in. Remember?" "I do. I told you we believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, in standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. You said that was a beautiful idea." The Empress's markings glowed softly. "I remember." "Well," Jake said, taking position behind the desk, "it's not just an idea. It's who we are." General Kythera raised his weapon. "Enough talk. Kill the human. Take the Empress alive." The purest soldiers began to advance, but Jake was ready. Years of combat experience had taught him how to use terrain, even in a fancy council chamber. He flipped the heavy table on its side, creating cover, and opened fire. His first shots dropped 2 soldiers before they could react. The chamber erupted in chaos as the purists scrambled for cover. Plasma bolts filled the air, turning crystal decorations into glowing fragments. "Your Majesty," Jake called over the noise, "is there another way out of here?" The Empress had pressed herself against the wall behind the overturned desk. "There is a maintenance passage behind that wall panel," she said, pointing to a section of wall that looked identical to all the others. "Can you open it?" "Yes, but it requires my genetic signature and a voice command." Jake fired several more shots, keeping the purists behind cover. "Do it. We need to get you somewhere safer." But the Empress shook her head. "Where would we go? They control the palace computer systems. They will track us wherever we hide." Jake realized she was right. Running would only delay the inevitable. But maybe delay was enough. Maybe Amy and Ben would reach the other humans. Maybe someone would figure out what was really happening and send help. Or maybe not. Maybe this was just a good place to make a final stand. "Your Majesty," Jake said as he reloaded his rifle, "I need you to know something. What you built here, this empire where different species work together, it's worth fighting for. It's worth dying for." The Empress looked at him with wonder. "You truly believe that?" "I know it." Jake leaned around the desk and fired again. "On Earth we had wars for thousands of years. Humans killing humans over the color of their skin. The gods they worshipped. The language they spoke. But when your people came, when we saw what you had built out here among the stars, we realized there was a better way." A plasma bolt struck the desk inches from Jake's head, leaving a smoking crater in the crystal. "You showed us that different doesn't mean enemy," Jake continued. "You proved that cooperation makes everyone stronger. The purists think that's weakness. They're wrong." General Kythera's voice boomed across the chamber. "Human, you cannot win. Surrender now and I will make your death quick." Jake's answer was another burst of gunfire. "Counteroffer, General. Surrender now and I won't have to embarrass you in front of your soldiers." Despite everything, the Empress almost smiled. "Sergeant Morrison, do all humans possess your confidence in impossible situations?" "Only the good ones, Your Majesty." The purist soldiers were beginning to coordinate their attack. They had more numbers, better positions, and unlimited ammunition. Jake's rifle power pack was already half empty, and he had only 2 spares. But he also had something they didn't expect. 3 years of studying Zephyrian tactics had taught him how they thought, how they fought, and how to surprise them. Jake pulled a small device from his belt. It was a human-made flash grenade, not standard Zephyrian equipment. He armed it and threw it high into the air above the advancing soldiers. The explosion of light was blinding in the crystal chamber. Zephyrian eyes were more sensitive than human eyes, and the soldiers cried out in pain and confusion. Jake used their momentary blindness to advance. Instead of staying behind cover like they expected, he moved forward, firing as he went. 4 more purists fell before they could recover their sight. "Impossible," Kythera snarled. "How is one primitive human defeating trained soldiers?" Jake dove behind another piece of overturned furniture as return fire filled the air. Training, General, and pure human stubbornness. The Empress had moved to a better position and was watching the battle with fascination. She had never seen human military tactics in action before. The way Jake moved, the way he thought, the way he turned disadvantages into advantages. It was unlike anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. Your people fight very strangely, she observed. We fight to win, Jake replied, checking his ammunition. No matter what the odds say. Outside the chamber, more explosions shook the palace. The battle for the capital was growing more intense. But inside this room, one human marine was proving that sometimes the most important battles are fought not by armies, but by individuals who refuse to give up on what they believe in. Jake's last power pack was nearly empty. Around the chamber, 15 purist soldiers remained, but they had learned to respect his ability to fight. They no longer charged forward recklessly. Instead, they advanced carefully, using cover and coordinated fire. General Kithra crouched behind a fallen pillar, his dark eyes filled with rage.
Human, you have caused enough trouble.
This ends now. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. His uniform was torn and bloody from several minor wounds. The overturned desk that protected him and the Empress was beginning to crack under the constant plasma fire. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I want you to know it's been an honor serving under your command. The Empress touched his shoulder gently. The honor has been mine, Sergeant Morrison. I have learned much about human courage today. Jake smiled grimly and checked his weapon's power indicator. Maybe 20 shots left. Not enough to win, but enough to make the purists pay a heavy price for their victory. General Kithara, Jake called out, I have a proposition for you. I do not bargain with animals, Kithara replied. Just listen for a second. Let the Empress go and I'll surrender. You can do whatever you want to me, but she doesn't deserve to die for believing in something better. Kithara's laughter echoed through the chamber. The alien lover dies with her pet. That is justice. Jake had expected that answer, but he had to try. Now there was nothing left but to fight until his ammunition ran out, then fight with his hands until they killed him. He was about to rise and make his final charge when something unexpected happened. The lights in the chamber flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a red glow. What's happening? One of the purist soldiers called out. Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris came a sound that made Jake's heart leap with hope, the sharp crack of human assault rifles. Marines incoming, shouted a familiar voice. Amy Collins charged through the doorway, her weapon blazing. Behind her came Ben Turner and 8 other human soldiers. The purist forces, caught completely off guard, scrambled to meet this new threat. But human military tactics in close quarters were devastating. The Marines advanced with precision, using cover and mutual support to methodically eliminate the enemy. Jake, Amy called out as she dove behind cover. Sorry we're late. Traffic was terrible. Jake laughed despite himself and opened fire on the confused purists. Better late than never. The battle that followed was intense but brief. The purist soldiers were skilled, but they had been trained to fight according to traditional Zephyrian methods. Human tactics were aggressive, unpredictable, and ruthless. Ben Turner flanked left while Amy moved right. The other Marines provided covering fire and advanced in small groups. They communicated with hand signals and brief radio calls, coordinating their assault with military precision. General Kithara found himself trapped between Jake's position and the advancing Marines. His carefully planned coup was falling apart around him. Impossible, he snarled. Your own command ordered you to evacuate. Amy paused in her advance to answer him. Yeah, about that. Turns out those orders came through compromised channels. Someone didn't want humans in the palace during your little rebellion. Jake understood immediately. You figured out the orders were fake. Took us a while, Ben admitted as he shot down another purist soldier. But when we reached the extraction point and found no transport ships waiting, we got suspicious. The Empress watched in amazement as the humans systematically destroyed the force that had seemed so overwhelming just minutes before. Their movements were coordinated but flexible, their tactics both brutal and efficient. Your people fight like a pack of predators, she observed. We fight like a team, Jake corrected, firing his last shots at a purist soldier trying to escape. That's what makes us dangerous. General Kithara, seeing his soldiers falling around him, made one desperate final move. Instead of fighting the Marines, he turned his weapon toward the Empress. If I cannot rule the Empire, then it dies with her. he screamed. Jake saw the movement and reacted instantly. His rifle was empty, but his body was not. He launched himself from behind the desk, diving directly into the line of fire. The plasma bolt meant for the Empress struck Jake in the chest, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor. But his sacrifice gave Amy a clear shot. Her rifle fired once and General Cathera collapsed. His rebellion ended. The chamber fell silent except for the crackling of damaged electronics and the sound of Jake's labored breathing. Amy rushed to Jake's side. "Medic!" she shouted. "We need a medic now." The Empress knelt beside Jake, her markings glowing with distress. "Sergeant Morrison, why did you do that?" Jake looked up at her, his face pale but his eyes clear. "Like I said, Your Majesty, Marines don't abandon their posts." Ben was speaking rapidly into his communicator. "Palace medical team to the council chamber immediately. We have a wounded soldier." Outside the chamber, they could hear the sounds of fighting growing distant. Loyal Zephyrian forces, inspired by the human example, were rallying to retake the palace. The purest rebellion was collapsing as quickly as it had begun. "Jake," Amy said, applying pressure to his wound. "Hang in there. Medical is on the way." Jake managed a weak smile. "Did we win?" The Empress took his hand in hers. "Yes, Sergeant Morrison, we won. The Empire is safe." "Good," Jake whispered. "That's what matters." As medical teams rushed into the chamber, the Empress looked around at the human soldiers who had risked everything to save her. They were dirty, wounded, and exhausted, but they stood at attention, ready for whatever came next. For the first time in her long life, she truly understood what humans meant when they talked about honor. It wasn't about following traditions or maintaining dignity in defeat. It was about choosing to do the right thing no matter what it cost. "Amy," the Empress said as the medics worked on Jake. "How did you know to come back?" Amy looked at her with respect but no fear. "Jake taught us something important today, Your Majesty. Sometimes the most important orders are the ones you give yourself." As Jake was carried away to the medical bay, the Empress made a decision that would change the Empire forever. The humans had shown her a new kind of loyalty, a new kind of courage. It was time to share that gift with all her people. 3 weeks after the rebellion, Jake Morrison lay in a hospital bed in the palace medical wing. The plasma wound to his chest had been serious, but Zephyrian medical technology was advanced. The doctor said he would make a full recovery, though he would carry a scar for the rest of his life. The Empress visited him every day. At first, Jake had tried to stand at attention when she entered, but she had ordered him to stay in bed and rest. It felt strange to receive orders to relax, but Jake was learning that recovery was part of his duty now. "How are you feeling today, Jake?" the Empress asked as she settled into the chair beside his bed. Jake had noticed that she no longer used his rank or formal titles. Since the rebellion, she had begun treating him more like a friend than a subordinate. It was an honor that still made him uncomfortable. "Better, Your Majesty. The doctors say I can return to light duty next week." The Empress smiled. "That is good news. We have much work to do." Through the large window, Jake could see the city of Viridian Prime rebuilding. The purest rebellion had been crushed in less than 6 hours once loyal forces rallied. But the damage to buildings and trust would take longer to repair. "How bad was it?" Jake asked. "The final count, I mean." The Empress's expression grew sad. 47 palace guards joined the rebellion. 23 others died defending their posts. In the city, over 300 people lost their lives, most of them civilians caught in the fighting. Jake felt the weight of those numbers. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty." "Do not apologize for the actions of others, Jake. What happened was not your fault. In fact, your actions helped prevent far greater loss of life." The Empress stood and walked to the window. "The rebellion failed because of what you and your fellow humans showed my people. When faced with impossible odds, you did not retreat or surrender. You stood and fought for what you believed was right." "We just did our job," Jake said. "No," the Empress replied firmly. "You did much more than that. You showed my people a new way to think about duty and loyalty." She turned back to face him. "For centuries, Zephyrian military doctrine has taught that retreat in the face of superior force is honorable. That survival is more important than victory. But you humans think differently." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his bed. "Different isn't always better, Your Majesty." In this case, it was. When Captain Zexhai and the other loyal guards saw your Marines fighting to save me, they were inspired to fight as well. Word spread through the palace, then through the city. Zephyrian soldiers who had been ready to surrender began attacking the rebels instead. The Empress returned to her chair. Jake, I want to offer you a promotion. Captain Morrison, head of the new Imperial Honor Guard. Jake's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for such a position. I disagree. You have proven yourself in the most difficult circumstances possible. But more importantly, I need someone who can teach our soldiers the human concepts of determination and sacrifice. The door chimed softly, and Amy Collins entered. She had been promoted to Major and now served as Jake's second-in-command. Good morning, Your Majesty. Jake, you have visitors. Amy stepped aside, and Ben Turner entered with Captain Zexhai and several other Zephyrian soldiers. They all looked at Jake with expressions of deep respect. Captain Morrison, Zexhai said formally, we have come to request assignment to the new Honor Guard. Jake looked confused. I haven't accepted the position yet, Captain. But you will, Zexhai replied confidently. And when you do, we wish to serve under your command. You have shown us a new way to think about courage. The other Zephyrians nodded agreement. These were soldiers who had once looked down on humans as inferior beings. Now they wanted to learn from them. Your Majesty, Jake said slowly, what exactly would this new honor guard do? Protect not just me, but the ideals of the Empire. Show all our citizens that different species can work together as equals. Demonstrate that cooperation makes us stronger, not weaker. Jake thought about the offer. It would mean staying on an alien world, far from Earth and his old life. It would mean taking responsibility for soldiers from multiple species, teaching them tactics they had never learned, and helping to build something entirely new. But it would also mean continuing to serve the woman who had risked her own life to bring peace to dozens of worlds. It would mean being part of something greater than himself. I accept, Your Majesty. But I have conditions, the Empress raised an eyebrow. Name them. The honor guard must be truly mixed. Not just humans and Zephyrians, but representatives from all the species in the Empire, and they must be volunteers only. No one should be forced to serve. Agreed. And the training will be hard. Harder than anything your people have experienced before. Some will quit. Some will fail. That has to be acceptable. It is acceptable. What else? Jake smiled. We need a motto. Something that reminds everyone why we're here. The Empress leaned forward with interest. What do you suggest? Jake thought for a moment. Stand firm. Stand together. Perfect, the Empress said. Captain Morrison, when can you begin your new duties? 2 months later, Jake stood on a training field outside the capital city. Before him, 50 soldiers from 8 different species performed combat drills. Humans worked alongside Zephyrians who trained with Valorians who learned from Nexari. At first it had been chaos. Different species had different strengths, different weaknesses, different ways of thinking about combat. But gradually they began to work together. They learned that diversity was not a weakness to overcome, but a strength to embrace. Amy approached Jake as he watched the training exercise. The Empress wants to see you. Something about a ceremony tomorrow? Jake nodded but didn't look away from his soldiers. A human private was teaching a Zephyrian lieutenant how to use improvised explosives. Nearby, a Valorian sergeant was showing human recruits how to fight in low gravity. Amy, Jake said, do you ever miss Earth? Sometimes, she admitted. But what we're building here is important. Maybe more important than anything humans have ever done. Jake watched as a mixed squad successfully completed a rescue scenario that would have been impossible for any single species to accomplish alone. Each soldier had contributed their unique abilities to achieve success. The next day, in a ceremony broadcast across the Empire, Empress Lyrelai presented Jake with the First Order of the Standing Guard Medal. It was a simple silver disc with the words, Stand Firm, Stand Together, engraved in 12 different languages. This honor, the Empress announced to the gathered crowd, recognizes those who refuse to abandon their posts regardless of the odds, who choose principle over survival and duty over safety. Jake stood at attention as she pinned the medal to his uniform. Around him, his honor guard soldiers watched with pride. They had become more than just a military unit. They had become proof that different peoples could work together to build something better than any of them could create alone. As the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, Jake remained on the platform with the Empress. Any regrets, Captain? She asked. Jake looked out over the city, where beings from dozens of worlds lived and worked together in peace. He thought about the rebellion that had tried to tear it all down, and the courage it had taken to preserve it. No regrets, Your Majesty. This is exactly where I belong, the Empress smiled. I could not agree more, my friend. I could not agree more. High above them, ships from across the Empire came and went, carrying trade goods, knowledge, and hope to worlds that had once known only conflict. The dream of unity lived on, protected by those who had chosen to stand firm when it mattered most. And in training fields across the Empire, soldiers of every species learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that some things are worth fighting for, no matter what the cost.